Marcos was already a billionaire before his presidential term. Just for logic. A short commentary. According to news reports, BIR indicated that the Marcos neglected to pay $203 billion in estate tax, and someone said it was by the Supreme Court decision. Considering this as factual and realistic, then what is the logical implication? According to news report, quote, in 1997, the SC ruled with finality on the estate tax debt when it affirmed a Court of Appeals decision dismissing Marcos' plea against a 1993 levy and sale on 11 real Tacloban properties meant to satisfy the delinquent tax debt. The estate tax debt assessed at 23.29 billion pesos had accrued interest, and now amounts to 203.819 billion pesos, unquote. The Marcos property for 2 decades since 1997 must have worth billions too, so to accumulate a 203 billions of tax debt, right? Logically, taxable properties are your personal assets to mean they were not stolen goods nor ill-gotten wealth, because by taxing it, government considers it your assets. It's illogical to tax ill-gotten wealth, right? Objection comes in this manner. An excerpt. Quote, all income is taxable no matter how you got it. In estate tax, as long as it's in your name when you died and you own it, it's taxable. We don't really ask how you got it. As long as it's in your name at the time of your death, or it's in your possession, or you say it's personal property. For excise tax it's the same thing, unquote. The thing is, no court declared these taxable properties as ill-gotten wealth because up to now, government is trying to collect the tax. It manifests it's a Marcos personal assets because it wasn't being confiscated. It means one thing: the Marcos wealth must summed up in billions of pesos, as indicated by the tax value, which amounts to billions. So the question is, if their assets amounts to billions, then how much is the ill-gotten wealth? And could it be accounted on their assets, seeing the government considered their billions as clean money? Clean money in the sense that no court ever declared these billions as ill-gotten, right? So how could you say they have ill-gotten wealth when they were inherently billionaires? An excerpt says, quote, because as early as 1993, the BIR executed its final assessment when it levied and sold 11 real properties in Tacloban City, and as early as 1997, the judgment on the tax case had become final and executory, it added, unquote. So indeed there was a tax debt in billions according to these reports. So one thing is sure, Marcos family was a billionaire. So how could a billionaire steal for more billions? They might say, the late Marcos wasn't a billionaire. His income during those times in power cannot make them billionaires. The thing is, where did this property assets in billions as of 1997 come from? If President Marcos' estate tax was originally 23 billion pesos according to news reports, then his taxable property must have been more than that, in billions. So he was literally a billionaire. What's my point? Firstly, the Sandiganbayan court never established that these ill-gotten wealth, or the Swiss deposits, were registered under Marcos' name. It was actually on suspicious registry, yet nothing confirmed a Marcos claim that it was his. Secondly, the court said this, quote, the general agreement or supplemental agreements sought to identify, collate, cause the inventory of and distribute all assets presumed to be owned by the Marcos family under the conditions contained therein, unquote. Note: presumed. So what guarantee that these ill-gotten wealth must be accountable as a Marcos loot when it was merely presumed? Because Imelda and her children admitted ownership of the Swiss deposits, including BBM, in court. Let's read. Quote, private respondents also admitted the existence of the Swiss deposits and their ownership thereof. 1. Admissions in private respondents' answer. 2. Admission in the general or supplemental agreements they signed and sought to implement. 3. Admission in a manifestation of private respondent Imelda R. Marcos and in the motion to place the res in custodia legis, and 4. Admission in the undertaking to pay the human rights victims. C. Petitioner has proved the extent of the legitimate income of Ferdinand E. Marcos and Imelda R. Marcos as public officials. D. Petitioner has established a prima facie presumption of unlawfully acquired wealth. Unquote. So on this note, the Marcos claim, including BBM, on the ill-gotten wealth as their own reflects the reality that they believed it wasn't ill-gotten wealth. It was their own property. The thing is, they didn't prove it in court, thus the forfeiture of it was successful. So what's my point? It was Imelda and her children who admitted ownership of these ill-gotten wealth as judicially confiscated because the first family cannot substantially prove it was theirs. It was an unexplained wealth, I think amounting to $172 million. President Marcos was never part of those who admitted ownership of it, and was never alive to defend himself. So did he actually steal anything by reason of objectivity and justice? Foremost, it was never registered in his name. Secondly, Sandiganbayan court presumed it was his ill-gotten wealth. Note: presumed. Thirdly, by virtue of the estate tax he was a billionaire, right? Does a billionaire stealing for more billions make sense? Then prove it. Lastly, if these estate properties in billions were ill-gotten with certainty, why was it not forfeited, and instead of forfeiture it is being taxed to 203 billion pesos? Because of the reality that no existing court declared it as ill-gotten. Meaning, these were legitimate Marcos wealth. So the question remains, would a billionaire stealing for more billions make sense? Then prove it otherwise, the prima facie presumption of innocence must stand. They would say, Imelda and children admitted it was their property, so indeed they had ill-gotten wealth, right? Not quite. The court never have validated if the claim of Imelda is true or false. What if the Marcos family lied, for some premeditated reason? Having this as simple gauge of what is facts from myth, suggests the defects in what the Marcos family claimed. It cannot be proven that what Imelda admitted is true. So in matters of provable evidence, it wasn't established by the court beyond shadows of doubt that the Swiss deposits was a Marcos wealth as Imelda claimed. Therefore, what Imelda and children admitted cannot be proven true. In effect, there is hole in the narrative and no clear reason to believe they had ill-gotten wealth, right? Objection comes in this way: his tax returns confirmed he had no billions. His SALN confirmed he was not a billionaire. The thing is, tax returns or SALN is a taxpayer's disclosure of income, which makes it questionable. Did he honestly disclose his assets? What if he was simply being dishonest of disclosing his income? If that is the case, he hid the real status of his financial capacity, right? He could have been a billionaire, because if not, a 23 billion in initial estate tax shouldn't have confirmed his being a billionaire. Thank you and God bless.